to episode 36 of The Martial Truth. 36 episodes already? I don't believe it. Just for your information, I will be continuing. There will be some more of the Patrick McCarthy interview, but I thought I'd take a break from that and go back to it in a few weeks, and put up the next part of the interview. We just passed 12,000. We're actually almost up to 12,200 subscribers. We're closing in on 100 members. I really appreciate everybody. It helps with the channel. I'm planning some things this year that the membership fees that will help with me accomplish those things, and hopefully you'll benefit from it. When we hit that 100 member mark, we'll do some live events. I'll do a live podcast where you'll be able to type in your questions, and I'll talk about whatever you want to talk about. Again, if you like the video, please click that like, share, and subscribe button. It means a lot. The like especially, click that like, and you share it. It helps with the YouTube algorithm, which helps the channel to grow. All right. So today's topic, standards. Okay, standards. So standards. When it comes to standards in the martial arts, that's a very interesting word. Now, having a standard means, well, you have a certain goal or a certain level that's the standard. So in martial arts, let's say for Shodan, the standard is what it is. The thing is, and I'll use Ishinryu as an example. A Shodan in one school may not be a Shodan in another school. And one of the interesting things I see here in the States is far too much emphasis is placed on first degree black belt. I know when I was preparing for my first degree black belt test, it was a huge thing. The test was brutal. It was more like a Japanese test than it was like an Okinawan karate test. The instructor had a little bit of a tood with me, so I think he was trying to send me a message. And that was okay, because it was a tough test. I got through it, and I got promoted to Shodan. But again, that standard there may be completely different in another dojo, all right? And the funny thing was, in that dojo is there was only a test for Shodan. When he felt like promoting you to Nidan, he just promoted you, handed you a certificate. Okay, Sandan, the same thing. Although when I was there wasn't very many promotions going on after Shodan. There was only a handful of guys. So the question is, again, what's the standard? How should we have a standard? Well, the standard really only matters in your school. Okay. Now, I know we have associations, right? I'm a member of, the Ishinryu World Karate Association. Okay. So Master Shimabuku has a certain standard. That standard might not be the same as my standard, and that's okay. And the other things we want to understand with having a standard is some people may not like your standards. So I'll give you an example. I've had many Ishinryu black belts come and say, hey, I moved to the area, or I'm going to be visiting here for a while. Could I come and train? Sure. Some fit in beautifully. Some that had moved there permanently, they came into the school and initially didn't know what to expect, and they were thrilled. And they've been with me. Some of those people are with me a very, very long time now. Okay, I like to say that those are the guys I adopted. All right, but then I had other Ishinryu black belts come down, and they're paired off with one of my green belts, and we're doing some application practices. Throwing punches at each other, working on counters. And he's complaining to me after the class that he was having a really hard time with the green belt. My response to him was, how is that my problem or the green belt's problem? You were trained the way you were trained. We don't train that way. So if you stick around, your skill level will go up and you'll be able to handle the green belt. All right? But he didn't stick around. He never came back. And the reason he never came back is because he doesn't want to work. He wants to walk around with a black belt on and, everybody think he's wonderful. But then you come to a dojo that has a somewhat higher standard and you find out you're not all you're cracked up to be. Okay? So this is important to understand. And having trained in numerous martial arts throughout the year and being fairly senior in several arts, okay, I've seen different standards. I've seen different standards in Japan with some of the Koru, right? I've seen different standards in Okinawa, in both Kobudo and Karate. I've seen different standards in the Chinese martial arts I study. Okay, so the idea is you as a sensei, you as a student, you have to decide what your personal standard's going to be. So for myself, my philosophy, even when I was younger, because I got into martial arts at 15 and I was so into it, I decided to have a very high personal standard for myself. So I decided at a pretty young age in martial arts that no one was going to hold me to a higher standard than myself. And I often get asked the question, well, Sensei, your teachers aren't with you all the time. You don't go and study with them on a regular basis. You go and see them, when you can see them. And I said, yes, that's correct. And he said, well, how do you get better? And I said, well, what I do is I'm stricter on myself than they are on me. So I'm very strict on myself. I train to get better. So my philosophy is like the saying goes, you do a form 10,000 times to master it, or you do anything 10,000 times to get on the road to mastery. But the question I always ask when someone makes that statement is, well, what if they're practicing it 10,000 times wrong? Now, that 10,000 times has embedded some serious issues, some serious mistakes. Now, how are they going to fix that? It's going to be difficult. So what my philosophy is I may not do a form 10,000 times, but every time I do it, I'm going to try to do it better than the previous time. Okay? I'm not just going to work my karate forms fast and powerful. I'm not just going to work my Taiji forms slow. Sometimes I'm going to do Taiji with full power and speed, and sometimes I'm going to slow the karate down and check myself. So I'm my own harshest critic. So when I first started going to Okinawa back in 1990 or 91, whatever it was, and I first saw Master Shimabuku, the first time I was there for, I forget, 7-8 days, right? We trained and, we made corrections. Biggest thing was I was leaning over. He said, you've got to keep your back straight. And, I saw him about a month later at the World Championship, so he really couldn't, see me do too much. And then I saw him a couple of years later in 1994. And, we start training and he says to me, wow, I can't believe how much better you've gotten. And I looked at him and I said, really? And he said, yeah, you've gotten a lot better. I said, well, I'm just working on the stuff you told me to work on. I'm just practicing, and trying to get better, trying to do my movements better, try to generate power better. He says, yeah, keep doing. You keep doing. You're putting in effort. That's good. Effort's his big word. He loves the word effort. And, and I'd have other teachers say the same thing to me. Wow, you've gotten a lot better since I saw you 2 years ago. And I'd be like, really? So what I understood was that because I'm training myself and I'm trying to get better, but I'm not feeling myself get better. It's like a slow process. There's no sometimes in your early days of training, you can have a big jump where all of a sudden something clicks and now you could do things you were never able to do before. And that's like, wow, that's a wow factor for yourself. And you're like, okay, now I feel like I'm getting somewhere. But like in my case now, in my 46th year of training, there's very little wow anymore. It's a slog. It's I work to get better. I'm always working to get better. I train every day, okay? I take pride in my fitness level. I take pride in my ability at my age of 60 to generate speed and power the way I can. I see a lot of my contemporaries who don't have a serious self-standard. Their standard for themselves is very low. What do I mean? Okay. The standard joke in my dojo when I was slowly being advanced through the ranks was, Sensei, you'll never make 8th degree. black belt. And the first time someone said it, I said, what makes you say that? They said, because you're not fat enough. So the fact that that's the way someone looks at a lot of people in the martial arts, and I know what I'm going to hear. Well, you don't know if that guy's sick, or you don't know if that guy's got this. Yeah, put the fork down. Go out on the floor, stop counting, okay? Go out, train, lead by example, okay? In my dojo, I lead by example. I tell the teenagers all the time, when I was your age, if the 60-year-old man running the class could do more push-ups than me, I'd be doing push-ups every day. There's no way a guy old enough to be my grandfather is going to be doing more push-ups than me, okay? That's what I tell them. That's the kind of drive they have to have. That's the kind of drive I had. Now, the first dojo I came up in, I was young, and I'm in an adult class. And there were guys in their 20s, 30s, and 40s. And back then, it was a little bit more blood and guts. We wore no protective gear in sparring, okay? No protective gear. And if you think a 40-year-old man wants a 15-year-old to beat him in a sparring match, I can tell you now that's not the case. So in the beginning, I got my head handed to me, right? But I slowly learned how to get inside these guys. I figured out tactics where I could move in and hit them before they could get to me. And I didn't go over well with them, but that wasn't my problem. But it was great for me because it forced me to figure things out, right? So many of my contemporaries, like for myself, I don't have an association. I have students, okay? So if you want to train with me, you're more than welcome to train with me, right? People fly in from all over the place. They spend 3 or 4 days here with me. Some come for a week. And we do intense training sessions every day in whatever art you're interested in, right? Right after the New Year, there'll be several people coming out here, okay? I don't have an association. So by not having an association, I'm not concerned with the running of the association, okay? So, I've been part of associations that when there was a regime change, all of a sudden things changed dramatically for the association. Certain associations, it came a little bit more about money. All of a sudden promotions were being given out a little easier. And why? Well, now the guy running the association, he's no longer sending those membership dues to the teacher that was running it. Now those membership dues are coming to him. And all those promotion certificate dues are coming to him. So that's a lot of incentive, especially when it's yearly dues, right? So every year that January comes and you're getting this cash windfall, right? So instead of training and teaching, the emphasis becomes something else. And I get it. I can see how it happens. I understand human nature, okay? It's a natural progression. But my thing is if what you got into this for was for the physical aspect, the training, the fighting. You wanted to learn how to fight. You wanted to learn how to use these weapons at a highly proficient level. So you trained hard, right? You were in good shape, you're hitting the bag, right? But then all of a sudden you get to a certain point and now you got to buy a bigger belt because your obi doesn't fit anymore, okay? Now you go out, you do one kata, and you're huffing and puffing like you're going to pass out, okay? My first instructor, I virtually never saw him train. And before I left, I sat him down, and I had a discussion with him, and I said to him, I told him right out, I said, your problem is you've become a martial arts politician. You're not a martial artist anymore. You don't practice, you don't train, you don't teach, right? You come down, maybe you go out on the floor, you show one technique, and then you go back in the office. I said, you need to go out there, you need to train, you need to fall in love again with what attracted you to martial arts in the first place. And needless to say, that didn't happen. It didn't happen. And short time after that, I was out. I left, okay? When I left, several of the students from that school came with me. And, they said to me, I said to them, I'm just letting you know now, I have my own ideas about teaching. I have my own ideas about training, and that's what I'm going to do. We're not going to be doing things exactly the way we did in that other school because that other school is stuck. They're not moving forward, You watch one of them. You watch one of their senior black belts do Seisan, right? If he's 6th or 7th dan, he looks exactly like the EQ that's doing Seisan. He looks exactly like the pretty good green belt that's doing Seisan. So the idea is the standard for yourself should rise. So if my standard was initially here and I reached that standard, okay, well now the standard's got to move up. Now I have to reach that standard. Now I go to here. Now I have to reach that standard. So it's important to set a standard for yourself, set a goal, a personal standard. Forget your teachers. Forget your teachers. You hold yourself to a higher standard. And not just as a martial artist, but as a person. Okay? You know, I've seen tons of senior martial artists treat junior martial artists literally like shit. And it always struck me like I never understood that. Like, okay, so you're 8th degree black belt and this guy's only 3rd degree. So that means you boss him around and push him around and verbally abuse him? Why? You know, I don't understand it. You know, I only experienced that in one dojo in Japan, and it was a Jodo dojo. And eventually I had to leave that instructor because he's just not a nice guy. He treated everybody like garbage. And eventually, you know, he turned out he didn't have a lot of students. And the reason he didn't have a lot of students was he just wasn't a nice guy. Treated people poorly. He once said to me, he said, right now, Michael, you have 10 students. In 10 years, I expect you to have 100 because your Jodo is good and people like you. Then he said, which I thought was one of the saddest things I've ever heard. He said, my Jodo is very good, but people don't like me so much. I felt terrible hearing that from the guy, right? Like he knows he's got a problem. Well, what about making a correction? Make a course correction in your life, right? Have a new standard for yourself. Say, this is how I'm going to treat people. So I'm going to teach them high-level martial arts, and his martial arts was phenomenal. The best guy I've ever seen with a Joe in his hand. But I couldn't stay there because he just wasn't a good person. All right. And as I've gotten older, that being a good person has become just as important as them having good martial arts. All right. You know, I've been lucky. I've trained with some amazing teachers throughout the years. Some held themselves to a higher moral standards, others didn't. Okay. But, you know, it is what it is. I can't force my morality on anybody, right? That's your personal choice. But as far as physical standards, I'll give you an example of what Master Shimabuku once said to me. I was sitting with him up on a dais at one of the IWK World Championships, and we were just talking. And he turned to me and he goes, Michael. I said, yes, Sensei. He says, you know, when I look out, and there was probably 10 rings, right? He says, when I look out, I can tell who your students are. That's what he said to me. And I looked at him and I said, really? He said, yes. I can tell, oh, that's Michael's student. And that made me feel really good. And then another time, Gakiya Sensei and Yogi Yoshi Sensei came into New York to teach. And, you know, I had mentioned to them that I had kids that were really good, that they knew the material and they were really good. Like, what's the story? Like, can I promote them to Shodan? And I immediately added, I know it's not the same as an adult, but it's just a goal, right? So, you know, and it keeps the kid engaged. Now he's a black belt. Now he tries for 2nd degree. It keeps him training. It keeps him into it. So Yogi Sensei said to me, he said, Michael, your dojo is not just about this. He said, your dojo is about this, it's about this, and it's about this. And he was very complimentary about how I ran my dojo. And Gaki explained to me that he was not allowed to promote anybody under the age of 16 to Shodan, that it could cause problems for him in Okinawa. I said, fine. But him and Yogi both said, but Michael, in your dojo, you can issue your certificate, and then when the kid's 16, I will send him the certificate. I said, okay. Well, my son Nick was 13, and he was there that weekend. And Gakiya was watching people do kata and watching people do partner work. And he promoted Nick to Shodan, 1st degree black belt. And I took him on the side. I said, Sensei, you told me you cannot promote someone to Shodan until they're 16. He said to me, anybody that sees your son do Kobudo will not question whether or not he's a Shodan. I'm promoting him to Shodan. So again, I've always felt that if you have a good standard for your dojo, and I'll be the first one to say, if you have a high standard, you won't have as many students. There's been plenty of people that come to train with me and they get turned off dramatically. Why? Because I'm busting their chops. I'm not accepting good enough. No, there's no such thing as good enough. You have to train harder, right? I see people training in martial arts making the same mistakes they were making 20 years ago. And I said to myself, what are we doing here? My Tai Chi master Chen Zhanghua said to me one time, he says, sadly, for many people, martial arts becomes like drinking coffee. He said that, Michael, you like coffee, I like coffee. We wake up in the morning, what do? We make coffee. He says, and sadly, that's what martial arts becomes. It just becomes a habit. It's something they've been doing for a long time, but they no longer work on the improving of their ability. I'm still working on Seisan, the first kata I ever learned in Isshinryu. I'm still trying to get my punch better. I'm still trying to kick better, okay? In the Kobudo, I'm constantly working, tinkering, little weapons. Well, should my arm be in this position? Should it be in that position? And I'm always, always doing that. And in doing that, it allows me to see things in my students. So I hold my students to a standard, and again, sometimes it's frustrating to the student, because they knew if they went someplace else, they'd already been promoted to a higher rank, okay? But again, my first instructor had a bunch of certificates. So he had Isshinryu Karate certificates. He had Sosui Shiru certificates, Judo certificates, Aikido certificates. I never saw him do Aikido. In the 11 years I was there, I never saw him do one of the Jiu-Jitsu kata, ever. Okay? Don't think I ever saw him do all of the Isshinryu kata. I know we were going down to do a seminar for the United Isshinryu Karate Association with Harold Mitchum back in the early, 1990 maybe even earlier, 89. And he shows up and he says, go through third bow with me, Shishino-kun. And I'm like, I'm second dan. He's seventh dan. I'm like, okay. I go through third bow. He says, let's do it again. We do it again. He goes, all right, I'm not going to be able to get it. He goes, you're going to teach this down. You're going to demonstrate this down in Georgia. Huh? No standard. No personal pride. No personal standard. Okay? Same thing. One of his students is looking at his wall of certificates and says to me, I want this someday. I want this. And I turned to him and said, no, that's not what you want. What you want is the ability that those certificates say you have. So if you have a certificate, if you're an 8th dan in karate, and I look at you and I'm like, wow, this guy's not very good. Well, you're no 8th dan to me, right? If you're a Shodan and you're sloppy and you're all over the place, I'm like, okay, this guy would not be a Shodan in my dojo. All right. Again, I have personal pride. I have personal pride at my fitness level. I have personal pride in my martial arts. I try to have personal pride in my teaching ability. My students understand that if they train with me, they get better. They improve. Okay. And again, I'm a difficult teacher. I know it. It's not that I abuse my students. I don't. But I push them. I push them to go beyond what they think they can do. I push them to work hard, to take pride, to develop a skill. All right. This is very, very, very important. All right. I've seen far too many dojo where, I've heard of associations that give out loyalty promotions. Okay. Loyalty promotions. Well, we've known you a long time and we're gonna promote you. Okay. I'm one of the youngest ninth dans ever promoted by Master Shimabuku. I mean, I may be the youngest. I don't know. I think I probably am the youngest ever promoted to ninth dan by Master Shimabuku. All right. And, so some people may question that, and they can question it, all right? But one of the things you want to understand with the karate rank system is up to 5th degree is purely physical. After 5th degree, there's a lot of things that go into it. What are your accomplishments? Are you continuing to train? Are you producing students? Are you supporting the association? What else are you doing? Are you writing articles? Are you promoting the art? What are you doing? What are the extra things you're doing? Okay. In my case, I've done a lot. All right. And, so Master Shimabuku felt that he wanted to give me ninth dan. But also in my case, I feel my ninth dan is physical. He's very complimentary all the time to me about my karate and how powerful it is. He says to me, Michael, your karate is like my father's. Self-defense only. Okay. So, again, being a ninth dan is great. Being a sixth dan in Kobudo is great. But if I'm a ninth dan and when you look at me do something, you're thinking, boy, this guy sucks. Okay. Then what good is that piece of paper? Okay. If I'm a 6th dan in Kobudo and I go out and do something, you're like, wow, this guy's terrible. What does that piece of paper mean? And the thing to realize is it's not the paper. It's what the paper says. So if the paper says you're a 6th dan, well, that means you should have reached a certain standard. So when I look at you and I see you do Kobudo, and you're a 6th dan or a 7th dan or an 8th dan, I should look at you and go, wow, this guy's good. Okay? I shouldn't look at you and go, wow, how'd this guy get 8th dan? And sadly, I look at a lot of people like that. Okay? I firmly believe not everybody's going to make the higher levels of martial arts in terms of rank. And we can talk about the rank system. That's a whole different story, but it's the genie's out of the bottle. It's not going to change. And if you have a dojo, you need rank because you want to promote your students. And especially if your students deserve it, you want to be able to promote them and move them up, right? So, again, hold yourself to a high standard. Expect a lot from your teachers. If you feel your teachers, aren't really teaching you and aren't training you and aren't working with you, well, why are you staying there? There's plenty of places you can find that you can learn real martial arts from, okay? It's important, The standard also helps us preserve these arts, okay? So that's another very, very important aspect of it. Because remember, it is an art. It's not just about fighting. It's an art. It's a martial art. So yeah, in my case, I'm all about the real fighting, all right? But I also want to preserve it. The Kobudo, again, the way the world going, who knows? We may be using these Kobudo weapons again. But again, most of the time I'm doing that for fun and for fitness. All right? So, standards. Think about it. Hold yourself to a high standard. Hold your students to a high standard. If you hold them to a high standard, as they feel themselves improve, it'll give them more confidence. If you're just handing out promotions to keep people in the door and keep people paying, no. Many a time I had a parent come up to me and say, hey, my son started with little Johnny, and little Johnny's 2 ranks higher than he is. And my response to the parent is, did you ask your son why little Johnny is 2 ranks higher than him? And the parent says, no. I said, well, ask your son. And then the parent comes back and says, my son says he doesn't work as hard as little Johnny. So one of the things I use promotion as an incentive. So 4 kids join the dojo at the same time. There's one kid that's really into it. He trains hard, he gets his basics in Ishinryu Karate. Okay, I test him, I promote him. The other kids are looking, wait a second, we all start at the same time. I look at all 3 of them and I say, listen, you want to get it? Work hard. You didn't work hard. He worked hard. He knows his basics. Do you know your basics? I put him right on the spot. No, sensei, no, sensei. Okay, decide. Quit or let's go. And some quit, and that's okay. And others say, let's go. All right? And that's great. It's great to see the kids develop. It's great to see adults develop. And that's what we want. We want to have a standard. Recently, I'll just leave with this. My students in New York went up to Canada for Kotori Shintaru seminar with Sugino Yukihiro sensei from Tokyo. And one of our students in New York tested. and he was testing for Sankyu, third class brown belt in Katori Shintaru. And when he tested, he was promoted to Nikkyu. So he's promoted one rank higher. Okay? And the reason for that is we have a standard. Okay? A standard. If you enjoyed this podcast, please click that like button. All right? Share it. Subscribe to the channel. Consider becoming a member. It's only $2.99 a month. Hope you enjoyed it. And there'll be some other ones coming down the pike that I think you'll enjoy too. All right? Take care, and everybody, have a happy Thanksgiving. Thanks.